Hello, everybody. This is Nazir with my podcast, Dear Children, episode 4, which is based on the autobiography by my dad, Dr. Nazir Bhatti. In this episode, we are going to be focusing on chapter 5 and some of the chapter 6, which talks about a couple of his, a few of his stories from the simple cities of Nursha, Okara, and Montgomery, where they lived very simple lives. And you will be basically noticing, as I describe some of these very simple attributes to the life that used to be in this earlier 20th century. But very interestingly and more importantly, in this episode, we'll be talking about my father's relationship with his siblings. And now reading this book, it's clear to me why my father is the way he is, because that's what his interactions, most of them very loving interactions with his siblings, that's what it taught him. And that describes his personality, has described his personality over the years. So in 1947, a few months after the migration and Pakistan came into being, my father's dad was moved to a city called Nursha, which was a few kilometers from Montgomery, and they were exposed to at least a bigger house. They were actually given a bigger house in Nursha, but it was a very simple house where there really not much to describe. Even the kitchen was just in a corner of a courtyard, which was just basically nothing but an elevated platform, and on one side there was just a little wall which basically separated and really defined it as a kitchen. So really very simple stuff. Similarly, his school was a very simple building where they used to just sit on the ground, and my dad actually started in a class which was a school kind of class, and his older brother was in grade 1. But again, they really didn't have any books. They actually had wooden boards to write on, and they would use reed pens and some ink to write on them. And eventually my father actually retired as professor emeritus and was the director general of fisheries department for the whole state of Punjab. So it tells you that if you work hard, and it doesn't matter what kind of beginning you can start with, if you have the drive and passion, you actually can be destined to do big things. So just an amazing story, puts things in perspective for me. And then, in these chapters, he just described just some very simple episodes and cute things he experienced in his early simple life in Nursha. One of them, unfortunately, was the death of his younger brother Munir, who was just, I think, 3 years old when my father himself was 6 years old, and that kind of continues to be one of the dark memories he carried on. Just imagine losing a young sibling and the shock your parents and other family members go through with an episode like this. Because of the death of his sibling, his father actually got the opportunity to transfer back to Montgomery because of compassion grounds, and they were excited because he got reunited with most of his other family members. Again, he talks about the simplicity of his school and really being writing on a little board, and of course there were no laptops or iPads at that time. And he talks about there were just 30 students per class, and even though he was very close with his older brother Jamil and Amir, they were never really his friends and buddies. He had his own classmates as his playmates. So he always had that kind of respect distance from his older siblings. He also talks about his own passion as a student, that he got very sick with malaria in the early 1950s. And even though his teacher said that he shouldn't come and take his exam, he actually did persist and actually did pass eventually, which he just still remembers a big accolade because that was a challenge he overcame at his young age. He also then talks about his father being again transferred to another smaller city of Okara, and he was just 10 or 11 years old. And again, he got exposed to very simple things, a very simple and ordinary quarter to live in, and so forth. But again, he just talks about the happiness they still had, right? I mean, again, happiness does not require for you to have You don't have to be absolutely rich and have to have everything to be happy. Little things can define happiness for you. And again, he just starts talking about his relation with his siblings, and he has this little paragraph titled as Furious Battle. And this was the first time he actually got to fight with his older brother, got into some fight with his older brother Amir, and actually got some spanking and learned to respect him therefore and never to question him again. But he then starts talking about cool things he was able to do with his older brother Amir. For example, one of these interesting episodes where his brother Amir actually sneaked him in a cinema theater for him to watch his first ever film or a movie starring Dilip Kumar and Madhubala. And very interestingly, his older brother Amir actually sneaked in, picked up some cold soda bottles from a vendor shop and actually acted to be a vendor and just took him along with him inside the theater. They actually sold all the bottles, made some money, and then sat down, never left the theater, and for free watched their first movie ever. So how cool is that story? And similarly with his older brother Amir, they actually traveled for the first time in a train on their own, where they visited Montgomery. But they were okay going one way because they had money, but coming back they didn't have any money left. So his brother Amir had this idea that they're going to travel without a ticket, and they got caught. And then his older brother actually learned a lesson by he got slapped by the ticket master. Not a good thing, but again, slapping and spanking probably was very common those days. And then he just starts talking about the pranks he played on his sister who was younger. Just some cute things to look at. But chapter 7 is where things get a little bit emotional, where he talks about his older brother Jamil, who passed away I think 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, something like that. But what an impact his older brother Jamil had on him. He used to look at him, up to him as a role model, and very kind soul. Jamil made sure that he took my father with him everywhere on his travels, gave him his due attention, and taught him a lot of things on how to deal with folks in the street and how to be street smart. They together, watched movies, sang songs. My father got exposed to a lot of street food because Jamil used to love to eat on those street markets, and he got exposed to some amazing food and things like that. And then when his older brother Jamil got married, his wife Bhabhi Rani, as she was called, just became a very important, respectful personality for my father, and he talks about that. And then he talks about it in a very emotional way in this book, that when his father passed away, Jamil was the father figure he used to kind of look up to. And then eventually when his brother Jamil passed, that role got shifted to his other older brother Amir. He talks about Amir and them growing up together, and as I mentioned already, they did a lot of goofy things together. But even though they had this brotherly love, they were not really friends. There was this a gap of respect, which was very common and continues to be a very common culture in Pakistan, where with your older siblings, you have this respect relationship. He talks about both his brothers Amir and Jamil, that they gained his respect because they were very compelled to sacrifice anytime the family needed some. They did odd jobs for the family to survive, and they really kept the priorities of their family in front of them as number one priority. So he just talks very fondly about his brothers and the work ethic he got from them. Particularly brother Jamil did not pursue college and actually went into a job after his matriculation because he just wanted to support the family. And my father credits him a lot for his own success because he looked after him financially when he needed some financial support for his own graduation and masters and things like that. So again, a lot of emotional stuff in this book, and talking a lot about how the relationships can be among siblings. And then he just goes on to talk about his sister Jamila and how she was like a talking toy to him initially, and he was just so fond of her, and he tried to be a mentor to her the way his brothers were mentoring him, and just talks about all the mischiefs that they used to do together. And then very powerful few pages on the power of friendship, and he talks about his very good cousin Akram, who was also his best friend growing up, and he really defines to me, and I'm going to read these few lines for you, that how really a good friend, a true friend can and should be. And he says, although we quarreled and fought several times during our childhood, our arguments never lasted long. While we had our share of differences, disputes and disagreements we never held grudges in our hearts. We spent all our time together, never feeling jealous of one another, and always watching out for each other. What a great description of really a good friendship that one is. And then he just talks about that what an important influence Akram was on him, my father, to make sure that he was successful, because Akram used to look out for him and also used to guide him, like, hey, you need to pay attention to your studies, you need to pass this exam, or you need to show up to school on time. And he talks about it, that my father, that had Akram not been so pushy and making sure that my father was doing the right thing, maybe my father would not have been successful. So again, highlighting to me, and it rings a bell with me, because I've been very lucky to have some great friends in my own life who I actually give a lot of credit for my own success. So kind of understand that really, and it just rings a bell with me. So yeah, and again, there's just so many more stories about my father and his siblings and his friends and so forth. So yeah, I hope you kind of enjoyed this kind of good overview of these 2 or 3 chapters I read. Just again, makes very clear to me why my father is the way he has been, and where some of the positivity and love comes from, and where some of the annoying things come to, right? So again, it's just been fascinating for me to personally read this and again get some great life lessons. So I hope you enjoyed this episode 4 of Dear Children, and in a few days I'll be back with episode 5. Thank you so much for tuning in.